once I saw what was going on with COVID and post-COVID, how people were presenting with such dysregulation in their nervous system, that I knew a book of what I was writing originally would be great, but they needed something more to match where they were at. Because a lot of people I found couldn't read a book from cover to cover. They needed something simple and quick. And that's where this book came about, of 365 Days of Nervous System Care. Everyone has 5 minutes 3 times a day. Like, that's 15 minutes. It really isn't much. It's really changing our perspective of how much do I really want to change and how much do I really not like how I am at the moment will be the question, I think. These days we sit still and we have the exact same hormones and stress hormones running through our body, and we don't get rid of them. So over time, they cause havoc, don't they? Like, they shut down our digestion, we get high inflammation, we have tension, we have anxiety, depression. All these things happen because we're never getting rid of it.
Stories and Stanza is a podcast exploring creativity, resilience, and the transformative power of human stories. Through our 2 series, Between the Lines with creators and Fail With Me, focusing on wellness and life's challenges, we bring you authentic conversations with inspiring voices from around the world. If you are drawn to meaningful dialogue that both comforts and challenges, follow us on YouTube or any podcast platform. Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Stories and Stanza. And today we are joined by Tracy Whitton as our guest speaker, who is here to talk about her book, 365 Days of Nervous System Care. At this time of the year, it is showing up in the bestseller list in Amazon in Australia. Hi, Tracy. Welcome to Stories and Stanza. How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you for having me here. I'm looking forward to our talk today, and I'm doing well, thank you.
Wonderful. For anyone who has joined us for the first time, just a few things about Stories and Stanza. In this podcast, I talk to writers of different genre, and I have a keen interest in psychology and wellness, which is the other segment called Fail With Me. Today, I feel that we will be touching upon both areas in a way, because Tracy, you are a writer and you are going to talk about some of the interesting pillar of our awareness and wellness in today's time. So anyone who has joined us for this episode, please subscribe to the channel or follow us in an audio podcast platform where you're listening, so that we can bring more episodes like this for you. So Tracy, to get started, do you want to tell our viewers, listeners about yourself?
Okay, well, I'm a mother of 3 children. I have 3 daughters and I live on the Gold Coast. I've been working in the nervous system regulation industry, I guess you'd say, for nearly 25 years. I've been teaching started off as a meditation teacher, and then I went in and I studied yoga, and then I went in to study further yoga therapeutics, so more yoga therapy, and learnt deeper ways to regulate our nervous system and bring more calm into our lives and steadiness into our lives through restorative practices. I went on years later to get taught for a long time out of different places, but went on to get my own studio and ran that for nearly, I think, 8.5 years before COVID happened, and that closed us down. And then since post-COVID, I've always been working out of health retreats for, I think it's around 16, 17 years. I've been working in health retreats on and off, and I ended up going back to them through that period because it was harder to work myself. And I've been slowly writing this book in the background for about 8 years, and I split it into 2 books. So I parked part of it and then started to write this once I saw what was going on with COVID and post-COVID, how people were presenting with such dysregulation in their nervous system, that I knew a book of what I was writing originally would be great, but they needed something more to match where they were at. Because a lot of people I found couldn't read a book from cover to cover. They needed something simple and quick. And that's where this book came about, of 365 Days of Nervous System Care.
I look forward to hearing all about the book from you today. Whenever I am joined by a writer on this podcast, I request them that if they would like to read something from their book. I am a hobbyist writer myself, and I feel that the words, the world of written words come with a certain voice to anyone who is creating them. They have their different take of their inner voice, which they're channeling into words. And which is why I request writers that if we are talking about a book, if they could share something about the book, they could read something. It could be from the cover, could be the beginning, could be anything they want. So over to you if you would like to share anything from your book.
Sure. Well, I thought I would read the nervous system repair model, which the whole book's pretty much based on, and its qualities. The nervous system repair model, this model was born from over 2 decades of working with bodies in their most vulnerable states, in trauma, in exhaustion, in disconnection, and in the tender moments of return. It emerged not from textbooks, but from witnessing again and again what allows the body to heal when it has forgotten how. It is grounded in somatic intelligence, intuitive healing, and deep nervous system repair, not just through technique, but through tone. It's not about doing more, it's about listening. The nervous system repair model offers a way to reorient towards healing that honours our biology, our spirit, and our need for gentleness. It is made up of 2 core frameworks. The first, the 4 pillars of repair. The 4 pillars are the foundation upon which repair becomes possible. They are not steps but living principles that can be returned to again and again. Each one supports a shift in the nervous system, from protection to presence. Number 1 is safety, creating the conditions where the body can begin to let go. This is the doorway. Without safety, nothing else can land. Safety is both external and internal. We cannot force healing in the body that does not feel safe. Number 2 is surrender and compassion, meeting ourselves gently without needing to fix. This is where we soften into what is. When we stop striving to change our experience and instead meet it with compassion, we allow space for our true transformation. Number 3, uninterrupted pauses, letting integration happen in stillness and silence. The body doesn't integrate in motion, it integrates in stillness. We must allow moments of pause for the system to reorganize and repair. Space, allowing breath, presence, and rest to return. Space is both internal and external. It means making room in your day, your week, your inner life to reconnect. It is a space that breath returns, and with it, regulation. The 6 qualities is the second part of the framework. The 6 qualities of a nervous system in repair. When the nervous system is regulating, it begins to emit a distant feeling tone. These qualities are not goals. They are signals. They indicate that the system is shifting out of protection and into restoration. Each quality invites the system inward, away from hypervigilance and hypovigilance and performance, and towards restoration and presence. And those qualities are dark, quiet, warm, slow, soft, and still. And I go on to explain those in a little bit more detail.
Absolutely. And we will throughout the conversation. So first of all, I would like to say how this connects to the theme that I have explored on this podcast with multiple guests from time to time. this particular section where we talk about wellness and psychology and emotional intelligence, we call that section Fail With Me. And the reason being, I had a few difficult years in my life and I felt everything that I'm doing is not right. It's not working out. I was trying too hard. I was completely burned out and I went into a lot of physiological disorders. Then I happened to attend a somatic workshop and that changed my life completely. And I felt that I need to talk about it. And I chose the title Fail With Me so that when I open up this as a talk show, then we can say that we are objective about failure. We are not stigmatized by it. We are not, in a way, kind of thinking from a position of our conditioning, from our trauma, and from external factors. And if we look inwards in light of our failures, we can possibly understand, have that clarity, compassion, self-love, and be a better version of ourselves. That is how the idea of Fail With Me came about, and it's going on for nearly 2 years, and many episodes have been done. And what you said from the foundations, the pillars in your book, that deeply resonates with me, and what we have covered in the podcast so far as well. So I want to hear from you as to how does this idea, calling it Fail With Me, but talking about self-acceptance and healing in those different layers sit with you. You are a specialist. You are working in this domain for years, and you have written, and I'm assuming you are writing the next part of the book as well. How does this idea sit with you?
So are you asking sort of like how I've found moving through, like...
Let me reframe that question. Every person has their perspective towards failure and acceptance and healing. And I wanted to ask if there is a personal story you'd like to share, or conceptually you'd like to share with our audience, so that someone listening can get that sense of support and compassion and trust that we are bringing in authentic stories. It is not just my story. It's about your story. It's about the concepts that you bring up in the book. It is talking about opening up our mind to possibilities.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's so many different times throughout my life where I felt like I've failed myself and also failed my children. And I think the biggest lessons that I have learned has been through my two daughters that I have shared recently. A few years ago now, both went through 6 months apart from each other, life-threatening illness. And it's interesting because in hindsight, I can see that I know that I wasn't responsible and that I didn't fail them. But in the moment and for quite some time until I had that realization through doing the work, I held that as it was my responsibility and I had failed them. I had failed both of them, and how could have I missed this, or why, I could have made it different for them and in some way. And I put that responsibility on myself and then lived with quite a lot of guilt, mother's guilt. But then on top of that, I call it the threat detector. And it's constantly wanting to protect them and protect everyone else in my family, scanning my environment constantly for potential threats that could take me or them down again. So that developed through this part that I didn't know for quite some time, that I believed in my body that I had failed them. And so it took a bit of time, and I did have one particular light bulb moment where I was speaking with a friend, and I don't think it was just that what we were talking about, or it just was a series of events. And because I had been doing this nervous system work for some time, it was kind of like bringing all the causes and conditions together, like from a karma perspective. And it was right for that to unfold and for me to see how my body was responding. And then I was believing that it was old implicit memory that was constantly surfacing. But I didn't have enough safety in my body, or self-compassion, or self-acceptance, or even space or uninterrupted pauses, because it was so full on with them, particularly one of them, for so long. I didn't have time to reflect. So then it took a couple of years later that I was able to do the work, that I could see that and bring self-compassion in, bring this acceptance in, but first bring safety. And once safety was there and space was there, then I had that capacity to be able to look deeper, so that I could see, oh, how could have I known? I couldn't have been responsible for that. And even once I had that realization, it still had a ripple effect. It took time to break down those thought processes that had been thinking for some time. So that's what comes to mind straight away when you mentioned to me about that, because I did feel like I'd failed them. And to me personally, I think there's nothing bigger than feeling like you've failed your children, like particularly when they nearly died, So it was really big, and it took quite a few years to unravel that. I can say now, what are we, like 4 or 5? No, we're 6 years on now, 5.5 from the other one, and I don't feel that. I don't feel I failed them now, but I very much did for a long time.
Thank you for sharing that heartfelt story. And I can totally relate to what you're saying, because if I go back a couple of years when I had this difficult phase, my wife was struggling with certain mental health conditions, and our daughter was younger, and we were new in the country. And I was kind of seeking help, but I was not getting in the right direction, which is why I was thinking that maybe I am failing in that process. As I healed from that state, everything became very much clearer. That clarity was very important for my well-being, for my family as well. So if I am not well, I cannot keep people I love well. So I can totally relate to what you're saying. You talked about some really important aspects. When you say 365 days, that means it is something we take with us every day. Right? I get a question from people around me who listen to the podcast. We are so busy in our lives. We are just barely getting by. And then where is the time to heal? Where is the time to reflect or get better and prepare ourselves for tomorrow? So when I first read about your book and your ideas, it quickly brought that question back from what I have heard from my social circle. We are so busy with our lives, then how do we take care of ourselves? In this podcast, I'm trying to create that repository of knowledge, guide for wellness that they can avail. So anyone who is going through a similar situation, they can listen to this podcast. And if this speaks to them, they can go and read about your book. But before they go to the book, they can come to this show and they can listen and they can see whether the book speaks to them. That's the key idea. So it takes your voice and it takes to people who needs to hear them. So my first question, and you briefly touched upon this, that, when COVID came, all of a sudden we became aware that, we are not taking care of ourselves. Right. So, and we are so busy. So how does that self-care begin? What are some of your thoughts and how do you kind of expand that in your book?
I think, like, just to go back to the COVID part, like post-COVID, I think because of the trauma that a lot of people went through at that time, and there was this sort of kind of energy of, well, I've missed out on so much. I need, now that we're back out in the world, it felt like they just had this urgency to connect and do and get as much done as possible. But even if they weren't conscious of that, it was like that's what the energy was showing. People just were moving at a rate that was just so much faster than we'd ever done before. Like, we'd always been busy, but it really sped up. And on top of that, I think what was pushing that was the trauma underneath that people had gone through, particularly those in Melbourne. You are some of the, I think it was the longest shutdowns in the world. So and I've worked with many people in Melbourne because I was in the health retreats, and we had retreat after retreat full of people from Melbourne. And they all were sharing this with me, is that, like, we've lost so much time through this. And we've got to make up for that. And also, I'm deeply traumatized. But they didn't know what to do with that. And so their sympathetic nervous system just sort of put them into survival, which was keeping them moving. And they were just constantly doing to kind of suppress what they were experiencing, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional. And so what I was finding in clinic and in the retreat settings, people didn't have time. Like you say, they didn't even, it was like, where am I going to fit that in? And so when I started thinking about my book more and more, I'm like, who's going to read this and get to the point where they actually do the practice? And who's going to do half an hour practice? Or even when I say to do for someone that's experiencing really sort of long stress-related conditions, they may need the 1.5 to 3 hour sequence. But who's going to do that? So I felt like I had to start with meeting where most people were at, and that means that we can change the neuroplasticity. We know that the brain changes when we do something regularly, and that neuroplasticity will change. We don't necessarily have to do it for half an hour or 2 hours every single day to do that. We just need to do it. We need to just regularly tell the brain something different than what we've already been telling it. So that's where my idea came, because my dear teacher, Pema Chodron, that I followed, I've always for many, many years read her wisdom, or Thich Nhat Hanh, or one of my teachers, in the morning with a cup of green tea. And so that's been a practice of mine for a very long time. And one of her books is a little tiny pocket book, and it has, I think, 40 days. And you would open, and there's a piece of wisdom, it's this big. You read it, and then I would drink my tea and I would reflect on that and see how it felt in my body. I just do this process myself. She didn't tell me to. It was just, I'd read it and how does that feel? What do I notice? I can hear the birds. Like, I'd be practicing that present moment awareness, but also acknowledging what my body awareness was saying too. And it was just a short practice, and that's where I got the idea of the combination of how I was treating people and then what my practice. I was like, this is what people need. They just need regular, consistent, little, short tools that is going to slowly over time change it, because they don't have the time to, and they're not going to have the attention span anyway to start with, because they've been in SNS, sympathetic, hyper-arousal for so long. Their attention span's like this. So I need to meet that. And that's where that concept or that idea of meeting the busy, that can start to heal.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And one of the reasons I asked it is there are many books, in this section. And I wanted this book to stand out and tell our listeners that how it is different from other books in the genre. So that's where my idea was about. And you mentioned something beautifully when you were reading from the first chapter of the book. And this is something that I felt a fair bit of times in during my COVID days. Is one is hyperregulation and one is hyporegulation. So sometimes I'd feel that my mind is racing faster than it should, and sometimes it's going slower than it should. It's sometimes it's not at par, and then that is creating all the troubles. As in, in a situation where I am feeling upset, it's probably because of either of these two. And your book talks about regulation. So in both kind of ends of the spectrum, how do we regulate and come back to the normal pace? And what can be some of the alert mechanisms? How do I know that I'm going faster or slower? And then bring that back, or kind of ground myself to the speed in which I should operate.
Well, when you say, how do I know? That's where I say to people, if you don't know that, then you're probably in more of a hypo-arousal, which means a dorsal collapse, where you don't get the sensations or the feelings. You're more disassociative. You dissociate from your emotions, from your feelings. You're more flat, tired, so you're not really noticing. But people that are more in a hyper state or hypervigilant state will be really aware of all their sensations, aware of how anxious they are, nervous they are, tingling in their fingers or tension in their neck. They'll have a nervous wee, where someone that is more collapsed will not even remember to go to the toilet until they're absolutely busting. They won't remember to drink or eat until it's like, oh, it's 4 o'clock and I haven't eaten anything or haven't drank all day. So that's the difference between the two systems. But I actually have to say to people when they say, how do I know? Well, first we have to learn to stop. Like there's nothing, no magic pill really. It's like we have to stop and give ourselves that little space. And that's where I say to people, there needs to be a 5-minute check-in in the morning and a 5-minute check-in through the middle of the day and a 5-minute check-in in the evening. And even if you feel like, oh, that's too much, just start with one of those for the first week so that you can go, how do I feel? Because that question you say, how do they know? They won't know if they don't stop. And they'll keep getting the same results if they keep doing what they're doing. But they'll probably also get burnt out and run themselves into the ground. So the first step is you have to give yourself that pause, to stop for 5 minutes so we can get to see what I just talked about, to see, am I feeling anxious? Do I not notice how I feel? What is really going on? What is happening in my awareness? Everyone has 5 minutes 3 times a day. Like that's 15 minutes. It really isn't much. It's really changing our perspective of how much do I really want to change and how much do I really not like how I am at the moment will be the question, I think, and in how much we want to change. I think we really need to be able to come to terms with ourselves of a little bit of self-compassion, of enough to kind of make us step over that line to make that change, to give myself permission to give myself 5 minutes to check in.
Thank you for explaining that. Yes, I definitely think that this window is very important. That's very, very short one, even if it is 2 minutes in a busy day, that pause needs to happen. Coming out of that autopilot, always rushing, always fighting for our day-to-day. That's very important. We started with the book, and you mentioned something very important about safety. And if you're not feeling safe, then you cannot possibly start your healing journey. And from many discussions that we have had on this podcast and from what I have read and things, so I'm going to link that with the somatic intelligence that you mentioned, that a lot of times this sense of threats, we are harnessing that in your body and we are not aware of it. And our threat response is coming from something we are keeping in our body and we are not aware of it. And we are reacting without knowing that, oh, okay, this is the trigger and this is where it is coming from. And yeah, I have personally felt that many, many times. And for me, it's not a linear thing, as in I notice something today and then again, sometimes I'm puzzled by something. Then I just note it down. Okay, this is what I felt. And this is, I don't know where this is coming from. And sometimes the answer comes in days or months or maybe later, but I try to write that down because I feel that if I write it down, my mind will find a solution, or it is at least making my mind aware that there is a problem that we need to go and address, even if it doesn't come in the moment or doesn't come in a couple of days. So I wanted to hear from you about this somatic intelligence part of it that you are covering in your book. How do we find out that this trauma or this hurt or this repressed memory is kept somewhere in our body, somewhere in our sensation, and mind is not aware of it and it's reacting? How do we identify that and how do we dissolve that so that we can move forward, so that we can heal? It's one of my favorite subjects to talk about because I was telling you about my own story. In that burned out phase, I was like very angry and upset most of the times because I was not sure what was going wrong. And when I was able to start looking inwards and understand some of those things, I can see that physically also there was a massive improvement, which I was not sure earlier. Like I was not healthy, not digesting well, and I was not sleeping well. Gradually, when I understood this is where I'm keeping my stress, and then I kind of started going for walks, and gradually I felt so much better about myself. I kind of was able to identify where I was keeping my stress or my anxiety. And again, this is not flat. This is something I have seen come up in layers. It's a continuous evolving process for me. You are talking about this in your book too. So I want to hear your thoughts around how are we aware of these signals that we are keeping in our body and how do we work on them?
Mhm. Maybe I'll look at looking at your story. The first thing is that safety begins with awareness. Like that is the first step. And when I say that, it means that we're bringing, when you feel unsafe, you're returning to the present moment and you want to anchor into reality, not fear. So often you might be feeling this impending doom or nervousness. That is a part of you that is arising. But when we come deeply into the present moment and the intelligence of that moment, that fear that is arising is coming out of that intelligence. Yeah? And so the first step is safety comes through awareness. And when you were sharing your story, you were saying that you went for walks and your digestion, there was a few points that you mentioned there, or that your digestion wasn't good, your health wasn't good, you weren't taking walks. That you were telling me that you had possibly dorsal collapse and possibly, pinging between dorsal collapse and sympathetic overdrive, right? So because your mind was sometimes busy and then other times it was collapsed. So you were going between the two. When you started to walk and do longer walks, what's actually happening there? There would have been more awareness coming in at the same time, but physically you're also engaging the vagus nerve because you're walking, you're reducing your stimulation through your senses, all your senses, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're smelling, tasting, feeling, because you're minimizing your stimulation to more unitasking. There's also the vestibular part of that where you're walking as well, like you're moving left and right hemisphere of the brain. Like there's quite a lot going on there when you're walking. Walking it's such a valuable somatic tool. It's my go-to for all for both hypo and hypervigilant systems, because it helps to bring those somatic symptoms to the surface. But there's also this great awareness that is happening and growing as well, because we're not multitasking anymore. We're reducing our stimulus through our sensory system. And over time, because the vagus nerve engages because of that process, you begin to rest and digest. And when you begin to digest, you're digesting physically, mentally, emotionally, right? And then all of a sudden you start to see things with clarity because the vagus nerve is activated. And then ventral vagal is what you're experiencing, which is a lot of clarity. Wise mind comes in instead of the wild mind that was there before when it's in SNS. So that's what I'm picking up as you're telling me your story, is you had low vagal tone.
Yeah,
What?
definitely.
Yes. And then your tone began to grow and you began to activate your vagus nerve. And as time went on, it's not linear. It grows and you kind of go back a bit and then you go forward for a couple of weeks and then you go back for a week. That's how it works. That's how the nervous system works. But over time, you look back and you go, oh, actually, wow, I've come so far. You've strengthened that. But you've also strengthened your natural ability of mind, which it's natural to move away and come back and to be aware of what's present in this moment. That's the natural ability of mind. But that becomes clear. We get that prajna, that happens, and the mind now no longer is distracted on all of the stimulus. It's learned what it's natural. Well, it hasn't learned, it's remembered. What's natural is to come back to the present moment and return. And then in that, it holds everything that's in its awareness. And that can be fear, can be anger. And so now we start to look at that as a part of me, not completely who I am. It's just the part that maybe I was identifying with at that time. And so I try to say to a lot of my clients not to get too hung up on implicit memory. It's really scary to begin with because there's these sensations or feelings that are coming and you look around in your environment, you are safe. This doesn't make sense. What's going on? And we tried desperately to connect the dots to go, why am I experiencing this? I have no memory, but I'm feeling terrible, or I'm really angry, or I'm scared, or I feel like something bad's about to happen, but everything's fine. So one thing I will teach straight away is that I find their anchor. I want to find an anchor for them to feel safe so that they can observe their environment. Somatically, we meet it. So there's 3-step process always when I'm working with people. Is first step is to meet what their system is presenting. So if that's a hypervigilant, there's a lot of energy, then I'm going to meet that with something similar to kind of help integrate that. Because if we think about in the wild, when we used to be confronted by a dangerous animal, we would run. We would be in fight or flight. We'd get all of those stress hormones running through our body, but we would be running them off. These days, we sit still and we have the exact same hormones and stress hormones running through our body, and we don't get rid of them. So over time, they cause havoc, don't they? Like they shut down our digestion. We get high inflammation. We have tension. We have anxiety, depression. All these things happen because we're never getting rid of it. So first step is like we need to get rid of that. We need to acknowledge that I'm feeling that and let's move with that. Let's move with the fact that I'm being chased by a tiger. And then the second step is like, that's the step where we come into this giving it the tone. So I get them to go, okay, how are you feeling? What's going on? Now that we've kind of moved that, has it shifted? Has it reduced by even 1%? Because if it has, we know we're activating the vagus nerve. We know we're stepping out of SNS and we're helping do what our body knows what to do. We're allowing it to do what it needs to do. And that can be like shaking, it can be bouncing, it can be walking, it can be shorts like sprinting for 30 seconds. It can be swimming, it can be showering. There's so many ways to meet it somatically. Then the next somatic tool is usually an invitation to feed the body through those tones that I was talking about, that I found over 25 years of working with thousands of bodies, that there's this pattern happens here with everyone. Like I really started to see it with every person, that we all have these regulating tones that the nervous system's communicating, that it wants to heal. So I tap into that. So often, if that energy has moved from hypervigilant down and dropped down a bit, then I'll give it some safety, because that's that step. We need to meet it first so we can drop out and come into a bit of safety. And while I'm doing a different tool, so say if we're bouncing, I'll get them to connect to the earth, feel their feet on the earth. So I'm creating safety there. I'm always creating ground all the time and earthing them while they're feeling really discombobulated. But the middle step is really building that safety. And it might be darkness, like closing over the eyes and just doing some straw breathing, hands over the ears for quiet, taking out the noise. Can be points of the vagus nerve, different points that we work with on the vagus nerve. And then once we've done that, then I do an integration, which is step 3. And that step 3 is powerful because that's where they're saturating their parasympathetic nervous system, their deep activation. And they can do that process themselves. And I can do it when I treat people here and I work with their whole nerve the same, but they can do that themselves without having to have me, just by learning those skills. And so that step 3 might be that they put their legs up the wall, they might be laying on a rolled blanket, they might be laying on their backs in Shavasana. There's all different postures to do that. And then, that can consist of, that whole process might literally only be 10 minutes. And we can go from a hypervigilant system to most people will go to feeling peace, calm. And then you will have a small amount of people that they'll drop down in that 10 minutes. But they will still have the stress there because they've had long-standing stress for many years, and that will take a bit more to shift. But I had a session just recently with a lady like that. And by the end of the session, all her neurological symptoms had actually gone. And, I didn't expect that at all because that stuff can take a long time. So I hope that sort of answered around somatics.
Yes, it definitely did. As I told you, that attending one somatic workshop opened my eyes to the possibilities. And I was looking at things very differently from then on. And that is not a linear healing process. It was just a curiosity that is like a seed that is embedded in your mind. I have noticed that the way it works magically, for me, that meditation is that walk. If I do not go for that walk on a day, then I feel that I have not done something. I have built that as a part of my routine, and I try to sort of, the grounding exercise that you're talking about. For me, that is the walk. That is the time that I give myself and understand my thoughts. And sometimes I don't understand things. And magically, this comes back to me in a couple of days, sometimes in a couple of weeks. And I say, oh, so this is what it was. So it kind of works like a beautiful magic. And thank you for breaking it down so beautifully for our listeners today. And for anyone listening, if they want to work with you, how would they find you? Would we put some links in our episode description?
Yeah, I can give you links. And look, I'm well aware. I work with people all around the world now. So I've really done my best to accommodate everyone, whether it's location or budget, So I do have people that live locally and financially can support that. So they do work with me one-on-one. And that is awesome because I get to work with the vagus nerve directly. And I normally kind of work myself out of business in a sense, because once their vagus nerves engage, they don't need to see me. I'm not a person that you need to keep coming back to. So I might see them initially for a few, and depending on their dysregulation and how long the stress has been there, how long the long-standing part of that stress, because it could be years. And so sometimes I might see people, even in a chronic situation, I think I've only ever seen someone, the most I've seen someone is like once and then the second week again, and then maybe 2 weeks after that, the third time, and then I go to pretty much fortnightly or 3 weekly or monthly. And some people I see 6 monthly. It just varies. And then I have like online courses, 21 days from burnout to balance. I have a library of all of my different videos and audios that are taking people through nervous system care. I run the Nervous System Reset, which is a 4-week course that teaches them and educates them around these pillars and the qualities. I run that usually a couple of times a year. And then I do remote coaching. So I work remotely as well. So there's a few different ways that you can access. And now I have the book, which is, I think this is an incredible tool. There's so much in here and that they can access and get so much out of. And that's what we're hearing back, even though it's only been 2 months, I think on the 10th of this month, it's been since it's been launched. So I'm only just starting to hear back how it's landing in people's bodies.
That's wonderful. And this is such an interesting subject that we can go on and on about and explore. Yeah. And it's very interesting personally as well as, in the podcast. But in the interest of time, I would like to wrap up the discussion. Of course, we started off with the book, what is covered in the book, who the book is for, and we covered the grounding principles, where to start from, where to identify, and how to stop, how to begin that journey of mindfulness. And then how does the recovery looks like? How does the healing look like? I think we have covered in this discussion so far. To wrap it up from your end, is there anything else you would like to share with our audience today?
I think the only thing I like to say to people is I do hear one of the biggest things that happens that I hear from my clients is that they feel like their bodies failed them or they've failed themselves. And I just like to say that no, I would change that around and just say your body's not failing you. It's just giving you messages. It's your nervous system trying to communicate with you and you just haven't learned its language. And so when you learn its language, then your whole life changes. And that's what this book can do. That's what nervous system care can do. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for joining me and for this wonderful and heartwarming discussion.
Thank you so much for having me.
I would love to continue, but in the interest of time, let us time box it here. But I would love to hear from you again, especially because we are in the same time zone. That will be much easier for me to work with. Thank you for anyone who has joined us for this episode, whether you're watching it on YouTube or whether you're listening it on an audio podcast app. Please subscribe to the channel and leave a good review. And I'll leave the link for Tracy's book in the episode description so that you can go and take a look. Thank you so much.